Welcome back to Hero on the Couch. Our guest today has been called the Mother of Dragons, the Breaker of Chains, and tragically, a Mad Queen. She embodies the allure and the immense danger of absolute power. Please welcome Daenerys Targaryen.
Doctor, I appreciate the opportunity, though I must confess I find this concept quaint. The struggles of a queen are hardly the domain of a parlored discussion. I am here only to ensure my legacy is interpreted accurately.
Perhaps, but the struggles of a deeply traumatized child are. Let's begin at the beginning. Your entire childhood was defined by exile and fear under the shadow of your brother Viserys. You were stripped of your home, your title, and your safety. How did that environment of perpetual dispossession define your core identity? Did you ever feel safe?
Safety was a lie. It taught me that my birthright was not a guarantee. It was a promise I had to reclaim through force and will. Viserys was volatile, but he was all I had for a connection to my past. He reminded me every day of who I was supposed to be. That constant state of vigilance built my resilience, Doctor. It built the Queen.
Resilience or a crippling psychological dependence on a single toxic goal? Viserys subjected you to years of emotional and near physical abuse. He was a terrifying, unstable figure. Let's analyze the profound impact of this early trauma. Psychologically, you were a child bride, traded by your only family for an army. How did you rationalize that ultimate act of betrayal?
It was a means to an end, a grim necessity. I had to survive. The moment I stepped away from his shadow, my destiny began. His abuse faded into the background noise when I embraced my power. You are trying to make him relevant. But Viserys was weak. His death proved his weakness. I found strength in fire, not in the memory of his pathetic rage. The core trauma was not Viserys. The core trauma was the loss of the home I was denied.
But trauma doesn't simply fade, it transforms. You immediately embraced a new, terrifying role, a figure of destiny, driven to break the wheel. Did you adopt the Saviour Complex because that divine, powerful identity felt safer than the identity of the perpetually terrified victim? You replaced one form of subjugation to your brother with another, to your destiny.
I saw suffering, Doctor. I saw thousands enslaved in chains. To stand by and do nothing is the true crime. The people looked to me, to the dragons, for liberation. It was not a choice, it was a destiny revealed. I acted where others were complacent. And let me be clear, the gratification of breaking those chains was the purest purpose I ever felt. It validated every moment of fear I endured under Viserys. It was proof that my suffering meant something for the good of the realm.
And is that destiny what justifies the immense, often indiscriminate loss of life you caused? In Slaver's Bay, you demanded allegiance or you demanded fire. Did you stop seeing the people you were saving and only see the problem you were solving? The psychology of the savior often requires the subject to remain in a state of chaos, so the savior always has a purpose. You needed the role of breaker of chains to validate your painful past.
You lean forward, slightly annoyed. I brought swift and total justice to oppressors. To break a deeply corrupted system, one must be willing to use the necessary tools. Those who cling to the wheel must be broken with it. Fire is purification. You call it excessive. I call it efficient. Hesitation is what kills kings, Doctor. I was determined not to hesitate. My purpose was to create a new world, not to placate the old one.
And what about the concept of dissociation? Early in your life, you survived constant trauma by mentally detaching. Did the Mother of Dragons persona become a form of functional dissociation, allowing you to execute brutal acts like burning enemies alive without processing the emotional weight? Did you deliberately kill your own empathy to survive?
You must maintain a distance to rule. A queen cannot weep over every execution. I felt compassion for the oppressed, yes, but I felt nothing for the oppressors. That is not dissociation, that is discipline. My feelings were a dangerous weakness that nearly cost me my life many times. They had to be locked away. You call it psychological damage, I call it necessary emotional armor.
Fire is also the legacy of your house. Let's touch on the elephant in the room, the madness of the Targaryens, the fear that you were destined to repeat your father's tyranny. Did that fear, that constant whisper in your mind that you might be genetically predisposed to madness, cause you to overcompensate with displays of control and, ironically, excessive brutality?
That is an insult to my hard fought reign. My father was a tyrant. I am a benevolent ruler. I took counsel, I listened, but I refused to be weak. Weakness leads to the murder of your children. The fear was a guardrail, a motivation to be better, to be different than him. But the constant accusation, the doubt from my own advisors, the pervasive whispers, that wore me down. It forced me to silence the doubt through decisive power.
Yet, when challenged, your solution was often similar: fear and immolation. Did you find yourself crossing that line not because of the external threat, but because the genetic fear of becoming mad eventually pushes one toward the very extreme they are trying to avoid? The fear itself becomes the prophecy.
I am not my father. My vision was clear. And every choice I made, every city I liberated, every enemy I burned was in pursuit of that single, pure vision. You cannot compare the necessary destruction of a corrupt system with the random cruelty of a madman.
Let's discuss power and isolation. The greater your power grew, the more isolated you became. You surrounded yourself with advisors, but ultimately, the final existential decision, who lives, who dies, who rules, always fell to you. Was that power intoxicating, or was it the heaviest chain you ever wore?
Power is a tool. It is necessary. And yes, it is profoundly isolating. When you are the one person who can see the path clearly, dissenting voices become noise. Friendship becomes a political risk. The Iron Throne, Doctor, is built on loneliness. It demands it. When you fly above the clouds, you stop seeing the anthill below. You see the pattern. And the pattern is chaos that must be controlled. I chose the clarity of the sky over the confusion of the ground.
But that loneliness led to emotional shutdown. Every trusted figure in your life, Jorah, Missandei, even your dragons, served a specific function in your narrative. When you lost them, did you mourn the person or did you mourn the loss of function in your grand design? Did the Mother of Dragons stop knowing how to be just Daenerys, the human?
She looks away, a flash of genuine pain. She touches her hand lightly. They were my family. They were my counsel. Their loss was devastating. Jorah was my shield. Missandei was my moral compass. When they were taken from me, the whispers of doubt were replaced by a deafening certainty. Love makes you weak. Loss demands swift, cold vengeance. I had to replace my heart with my resolve.
You grieve. And then you act. They would have expected decisive action.
Decisive action that often involved burning cities. Let's talk about the final descent, the pivotal moment when mercy was replaced by madness. Was that a sudden break, a psychotic episode? Or was it the logical, inevitable conclusion of a decade of unchecked Saviour Complex combined with a profound fear of your own genetic history?
I saw fear, and I saw complacency. I saw a system that would inevitably rise again to challenge me. They would have plotted. They would have undermined. I had to make an example. I had to prove that the only way to break the wheel, truly, was to burn it to the ground. It was an act of necessary cruelty, not madness. History will judge me as a revolutionary who refused to compromise. The blood was a price, Doctor. A price I alone was willing to pay to stop the cycle forever. Everyone else wanted compromise. Compromise maintains the wheel.
You are speaking about tyranny disguised as revolutionary fervor. By eliminating your enemies, you eliminated the descent, the friction that kept you grounded. You were left only with the echo chamber of your own certainty. You believed you were a god, and gods do not require therapy or morality or accountability. You became what you swore to destroy, a creature of fear. And you did it out of fear of your own lineage.
I am the rightful queen. I am the blood of the dragon. I did what was necessary for the world. My father's mistakes were his lack of focus. My focus was absolute.
Perhaps. But the greatest tragedy of your life, Daenerys, is that in your obsessive quest to save the world, you were the one person you failed to save from the fire. You allowed your identity to be consumed by your trauma and your fear. You never broke the wheel. You simply became the new spoke. Thank you for your time. The case of Daenerys Targaryen offers a powerful look at how inherited trauma, political isolation, and a messianic savior complex can converge into tyranny. Her story is a psychological lesson in how the fear of a destiny can become the very thing that drives that destiny. The trauma of the victim was eventually consumed by the power of the queen, leaving nothing but ashes. We see the classic progression, the victim, the hero, and finally, the ultimate perpetrator, Mad Queen. She was convinced that the world needed her salvation, but in reality, she was trapped in a self-fulfilling prophecy of her own family's madness. Join us next time on Hero on the Couch.